now.
Got it.
Well, good evening from London, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another Harif lockdown lecture, or perhaps we should rename them as simply Zoom events. Harif, for those who don't know us, is the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. We're a group of volunteers, and we do our best to educate on the history and heritage of these Jews. Please do check out our website, which is www.harif.org. You can subscribe there if you're not already on our mailing list. And do also check out our sister website, Point of No Return, which you can access by just clicking on news on our Harif website. This session is being recorded. It's actually being live streamed to our Harif Facebook page now. And a video will be uploaded to our video channel, our YouTube channel on the Harif website, and will be there within a couple of days, maybe sooner. Right, so to get on to tonight's topic, or before I do, I just want to mention that if you have any questions or comments or anything of interest, please do write it in the chat. So to get to tonight's topic, it is 55 years since the Six-Day War broke out, and this war changed the politics of the Middle East. But while the media focus on the events leading up to Israel's lightning Six-Day War victory, the impact on the few thousand Jews remaining in Arab countries is often forgotten. In 1967, all these communities were shadows of their former selves. 90% of these Jews having already fled. Some 76,000 Jews remained out of a 1948 population of about 900,000. Almost all had been deprived of civil rights, but could still quietly pursue their education, run businesses, and enjoy a social life. But the vindictive Arab reaction to Israel's victory changed all that. Jews left when they could out of Lebanon, out of Syria, Sudan, Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia. Jews in Libya, taunted by enraged mobs, and Aden, where Jewish property was set on fire, were evacuated for their own safety. In almost all Arab countries, there were demonstrations and anti-Jewish riots. Some governments, like in Egypt, actively persecuted their Jews as if they were Israelis. In Iraq, Jews were hostages and not allowed to leave. And in 1969, there were public hangings of Jews accused of spying for Israel. The Six-Day War thus marked the irrevocable and silent demise within a few years of Jewish communities which had predated Islam by 1,000 years. Although they played no part in Israel's victory, and despite representations by Jewish groups and foreign governments, Jews in Arab countries paid a terrible price. Pursuing revenge, Arab regimes committed serious human rights abuses. They have never been held to account. Three survivors of this period, Eveleen Habib, who left Libya and now lives in England, Rami Mangoubi, who fled Egypt and now lives in Boston, and Lisette Shashoua Ades, who escaped Iraq and now lives in Montreal, will be describing what it was like to live through this period. We hope to have a second Zoom event focusing on Aden, Morocco, Tunisia, and Syria or Lebanon. And if you have stories to tell, please make a note in the chat at the bottom of your screen. So I'm very grateful to our survivors who've joined us today. And we'll start off with Eveleen Habib from Libya. Now, the original community numbered 38,000, but suffered considerably during the war years. Hundreds died in labor camps under fascist control. And at the end of the war, a vicious pogrom claimed the lives of 130 Jews. And there was a further pogrom in 1948. Eveleen grew up in a traditional middle-class family in Edgware, northwest London, but her destiny was that she would marry a Sephardi North African man, and she spent the first 3 years of her marriage in Tripoli, Libya. So over to you, Eveleen, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening to everybody. I'm going to leave all the important statistics and things to Lynn. This is my personal story of being a woman that married and went to live in Libya and lived through quite a trauma. But listening to some of the people, I do feel that I was less emotionally damaged than probably many of our following speakers might be. That's sort of, I just want to get that over. I'm very honored to speak to you tonight. As you heard, I didn't grow up in Libya, I grew up in Edgware, and I had the good fortune of meeting Aldo Habib, my late husband. He settled in London in the early 50s near the lovely Holland Park Sephardi Shul. He had told his father, who had a very substantial business in Tripoli, that there was no future for the Jews there and that the family should leave while they could. In fact, soon after the creation of the State of Israel, my late father-in-law, who in fact I never met, he went with some of his staff to Israel and tried to set up and transfer his very thriving car and garage business to Israel. Apparently, the conversations and discussions with the Histadrut were very complicated. They immediately wanted a 50% stake in the business. And of course, this was an embryonic, fledgling country, not the global successful economy of today. And he did not proceed and return to Libya. We can all say in hindsight, what a mistake. And if we only knew then what we know now, life would be very different, but that's another story. I met Aldo when I was 20, and I didn't know about Sephardi Jews or even where Libya was. But shortly after we met, he invited me to visit his family in Tripoli. My parents were understandably worried as they did not know much about him, but he gave business and personal references so that they could be assured that he didn't have 3 other wives and he wasn't actually an Arab. He also assured us that their way of life was very similar to ours regarding Jewish traditions and kashrut. As I said, my husband's father died before I met. He died a year before we married, and he'd been obliged to return to Tripoli to look after the family businesses and his mother and 2 sisters, as he was the only man in the family. My visit was a success. His family took to me as I did to them. And in 1964, we got married in London and a few weeks later set off to Tripoli. He told me that we would have to live there for the time it would take to liquidate his businesses and have the money transferred somehow abroad. We did not know what lay ahead. I'm not going to elaborate on my life there, as this is not the subject of the talk. I was young, adaptable, and happy, and made friends among the many Jewish people that lived there, mainly business people. Not many were professionals, and I'm still in touch with some to this day. I did not have to face the daily tensions between the Arabs and the Jews, and my husband and family knew that in many ways they had to be very careful, keep a lowish profile, etc. And Lynn has just refer to some of the many riots and pogroms that did take place before the creation of the State of Israel, and of course afterwards, which I'm not going to go into. Quite often, my husband would come home from work saying the police had come to see him as they heard this or that had happened, and went away after with a monetary gift to smooth things over. We come to the end of May 1967, where we've been invited to a wedding in Malta and left our 2-year-old twins and the Swiss au pair that we had brought with us in Tripoli. There was lots of family to look after them. I began to realize how normal life seemed. We could hear the news, read newspapers, watch television without censorship or danger. We rang my father in London with no problem. The phone hardly worked in Libya, and it could be days if it was raining to be able to make contact. And he could not understand why we had not left and was so relieved that we were in Malta. I said, Dad, he said, leave, there's a terrible danger. And he went up, he started telling us about the gradual buildup of tension throughout the Middle East and North Africa, fueled by Nasser's provocative acts against the Jewish state. We returned to Tripoli, of course, after the short trip. And I must be honest when I say I do not think I realized the danger, and also probably my husband was trying to protect me. I was 22. At 10 o'clock on the morning of the 5th of June, the news spread like lightning through Tripoli that a war had broken out in the Middle East. I wonder now how the news spread so quickly, but the Jews were well used to this over many years of pogroms, massacres and rioting, some much worse than others. Aldo was in his office in the center of town, his mother and family in their home near me, and I was out walking to the supermarket, pushing the pram with my twins in it. Suddenly, one of his friends rushed up to me and urged me to get home very quickly. His family went to stay in the center of town with their cousins, Aldo's family, who were in a block with a lot of Italian people with a certain amount of protection and anonymity. Although I think that the police knew where every Jewish family lived. And we stayed in our block next door to the American embassy with our English neighbors living next door and felt comparatively safe. Aldo came home very quickly from his work and was clearly terrified. I had no inkling of what was to come. Our windows and shutters were closed and locked. We had food and drink for a few days and could only communicate with his mother and family by a temperamental phone. As I say, we had our 2-year-old twins and the Swiss au pair, and my husband was feeling very ill, very stressed. He looked through the shutters and saw the streets filling up with people, burning cars and tires and shouting in Arabic, "Kill the Jews, the Israelis are coming to bomb us." And of course, they rounded on the embassy. The Americans are known to dislike any form of danger to them, and within a few hours, the embassy was evacuated and left practically empty. Some of Aldo's Italian staff came to bring us food and drink, but if I reflect, we were really prisoners in our home for 17 days. We did not go out and were grateful to the few Italian employees in my husband's garage and our neighbors who made sure we were okay. There was not the instant communication of today. We had no television, no mobile phones or internet. And I must be honest, as it's 55 years ago, that I can't remember the day-to-day events in our flat. I just know there was tremendous tension and how really terrified Aldo was. I think I was protected by my youth and my naivety and the thought that I'm British, nothing's going to happen to me. Our English neighbours kept us in touch as they could get out and go to work, but the activity viewed from our windows was enough to really frighten us. I realised there must have been some police control as none of the crowds never got near to our block or our entrance. King Idris, the elderly monarch, recognised the total breakdown of law. He was well disposed towards the Jews and he urged the Jews to leave for their own safety. However, this was not easy in the circumstances. I knew that sooner or later we would leave. And although I had no real emotional attachment to my flat, knowing our real home was in London, I started tidying the cupboards and clearing up, and even cleaning was probably my therapy. We heard, and I'm not sure how, the terrible news of a family group that had been advised to leave with the police to go to a place of safety, and then that they had been taken to a forest and killed. I believe it was 19 people. One day there was a knock on the door, and it was the British consul who came to see how we were coping and to arrange an exit visa for myself, the children, and the au pair. He could not help Aldo, who was a Libyan citizen. When I stop and think, I do not know how I finally managed to leave him, if there were tears or if I felt I would see him again. He was so aware of what was happening and what had happened in the past. Finally, and I do not know how, tickets were bought for a KLM plane flying to London a few days later, which was Shabbat, and we were booked on it. We never traveled on Shabbat, but I knew there was no choice. I remember my sister in London asking the rabbi if she was allowed to break the Shabbat to meet us at London airport. We left our flat in Tripoli in the car of a close Arab friend who for many subsequent years remained in touch until he died in Italy. He risked his life driving us to the airport. We took one suitcase and the equivalent of $50. As the plane took off, everyone cheered with relief, although I was also terribly upset and worried. I arrived home to be met by my sister and brother-in-law. We came home to Edgware to my father's house. I truly had no idea of how much danger we had been perceived to have been in. That's very complicated. Prayers have been said in shul, and there were articles in the paper, all talking about us and our plight. Aldo joined his mother and family in the flat in town. There was little or no communication between us, and 10 days later, I had a call that he was safe in Rome, and he came to London once he had settled his mother and family. He told me that when he left the airport with one case and a small amount of money, the police and customs officers who knew and respected the family lowered their eyes and did not make trouble for them. His mother and two sisters eventually settled in Milan, where they had another sister who was well established and had left Libya with her husband many years previously and lived out the rest of their lives there. Gradually, our family picked up our lives. Aldo had bought a house in London just before he married. They had managed to get some money out of Libya over the years. He had always wanted to settle permanently since he came to the country in 1950, but had postponed taking out British citizenship as he felt it might in some way jeopardize his returning to Libya. Many people wonder why he did not want to live in Israel, but we felt very rooted in London, and there are a large number of cousins that left in 1948 and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We have a wonderful connection with them there. In 1969, Gaddafi came to power, and the finality was that this ancient Jewish community more really ceased to exist. Aldo's mother was given a safe passage to go back to close her house and pack what she could and send it to Italy. And she asked Aldo to go back for a week. He said it was the worst week of his life and was grateful to leave safely. He always thanked God that he was spared and in a safe country. Despite all the money and property he'd lost, peace of mind that he found in England was so important. The Habib family were a long-established, well-regarded family in Libya. My father-in-law was the equivalent of a dayan or judge or magistrate and sat in courts with Italian and Muslim colleagues. He was also the leader of the community for many years. And I learnt that when he died, the route through the town to the Jewish cemetery was packed with people of all denominations peacefully showing their respect. Sadly, that cemetery was destroyed, and my husband was very, very, very upset by this. And when my husband died, and a year later we set the tombstone, we added a few lines about his father on the gravestone, which is in Edgware in Edgware. My father-in-law was a successful businessman working with one brother, having gone to Israel in the early 50s. They had a large garage in the center of Tripoli and dealt with cars, wagons, tires, and trucks. They owned several properties in the town. They also had a slaughter yard and were in the industry of supplying animal hairs for brushes, which were exported, as well as animal skins for leather. They had a wonderful farm, like a massive country estate outside Tripoli, with many houses on the property and thousands of olives and orange trees. We spent some wonderful times there. Once the family had left after 67 and then 69, they were contacted by wealthy Muslims to buy their property. The Minister of Tourism, the Foreign Minister that all used to buy their cars from Aldo, all looking for an easy purchase. Of course, the offers were derisory and the money complicated to access. I do not really know all the details, but very little was concluded. And I believe just the farm was sold and a proportion of the money arrived somehow in Italy. Basically, most of the property was taken. And about 30 years later, a very small amount of compensation was paid by the Italian government, as the sisters in Italy had become Italian citizens. The family left property worth millions of pounds. I know there have been many efforts to compensate Jews who left property in Arab countries, but I cannot truly see how this will ever happen. My husband never complained and was always grateful to be safe and well. He worked hard for the rest of his life, held his head high, and had a happy family and social life in London with wonderful children and now grandchildren. When all the subsequent troubles in Libya took place many years later, we would watch on television and he would say, "This is not the Libya I knew and loved." Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Eveleen, for that very moving and eloquent account. We do have a few slides. Lawrence is just sharing screen here.
Yeah, come on. Sorry, let me get rid of the screen. Eveleen, do you want to talk us through them?
I can talk you through this. This was me walking in front of the King's Palace, looking very glam with my gorgeous children who are now 57. And that was the King's Palace in the center of Tripoli. It was very beautiful. I can't recognize myself. I look so glam. And this was on the roof of my mother-in-law's house. It wasn't, Lynn thought it might be a Purim costume, but in fact it was the traditional garb of the Libyan Jewish women. Now, my mother-in-law didn't dress like this. I think I need to say probably it was the people that lived in the ghetto, they called it the Hara. I think they dressed like this, but it was something to send home to my family and friends, you know.
And we've got some pictures. Oh, yeah.
And this is
just because I'd written this article in this magazine called Shemot of the Jewish Historical Society. I just gave them various documents. It's Alda's birth certificate in Arabic, but I can't really say much more because I think it's all in Arabic, but I can see his name. But there are things I kept and treasured.
Right, he was a Libyan citizen.
He was Libyan. They were very honored that they were Libyan.
Not many of them were.
No.
Libyans. Yeah, right. And these are some shots of the riots that broke out in 1967.
I think you've sourced these, Lynn. I mean, yes. I just need to add, because I think that perhaps they're going to be more searing, the stories of your following speakers. I know it was awful, but I was very young. I was emotionally not the person I am today. And I just sort of things just happened. And although it is awful, I think there are far more searing stories, possibly. I won't say anything else.
Well, I think it was bad enough, you know, when you have small children like that and you have to leave suddenly and you don't even know how to get to the airport. I think that's pretty traumatic. And of course, today there's no community. I think there are no Jews left in Libya at all. So thank you once again, Eveleen. And we move on to Egypt. So Egypt had a community of about 80,000 at its peak, but by 1967, there were only about 2,500, something like that. There'd been
maybe 3,000, I'm not sure.
Maybe 3,000, right. There'd been successive
4,000.
waves of Jews who'd left, some of them very dramatically, particularly in 1956, when Nasser expelled thousands of Jews. So the Jews who were still there, well, Rami Mangoubi and his family were amongst them. And Rami, you were 15 in 1967?
I was 12 years old.
Oh, you were 12. Sorry about that. Please do tell us what it was like at the time and what happened to your brother, Sami.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn, for inviting me to share, and thank you for including my Jerusalem Post article in your book. I really appreciate that. And I would like to thank everybody for listening to me. So the story of Egyptian Jewry is long, but today I will just focus on what happened during the 6-day war, as I was requested to. So on the first day of the war, June 5th, 1967, I was taking the last exam of my 6th grade. I was in 6th grade. I was taking the last exam. And in the exam room, we started hearing anti-aircraft guns. We did not know what exactly that was. But when I finished the exam and I delivered the notebook, I went out and I was hoping to go home, and we were kept from leaving school. They told us it's a war, your parents will have to come and get you. And so they put us, and we had to wait at school. My brother, who was very protective of me, came and picked me up, and he, while we usually I would usually take the tram to home, we had to walk because there was no public transport. And when we arrived at home, my parents were relieved, and we were sitting there, and the neighbor, a Muslim woman, was a bit nervous because of the war, and she came to sit with us. And we were, the radio was on, and the media was predicting a victory. They were claiming that 70 aircraft were shot down. It was all a lie, we now know. And our neighbor was very nervous, and she said right away that Rami should not be the one going and getting you the grocery like he usually does. My maid will do that for you because it's too dangerous. So she was a very nice and protective woman, and we thanked her. So that was by 3:30. By between 4 and 5 o'clock, there was a knock at the door, and 2 people from the Mukhabarat or the Mabahis, in civilian clothes, the FBI type of organization, knocked on the door and asked that my brother come to the police station for 10 minutes. So my brother got dressed and he went, and we were in shock. My brother was not even 21 at the time. He was in his 5th year of university, and he was 20 years old. So about 1 month short of 21. So he went, and we were in shock. So when he left, not, just barely 2 minutes after that, the custodian wife knocked at the door, and she was crying because she was nervous for my brother. She said, "Why did they take him? He didn't do anything." And we told her what we thought, what they told us. We were still in shock. Just 10 minutes at the police station. A few minutes later, the neighbor who was with us and had left came back, and she saw him from the window being escorted or taken or thrown into a police car. And she was very perturbed, and she told us, "Why did they take him?" And we repeated the same thing. The custodian came, and he repeated what the neighbor said earlier, that no one, but even more, he said, none of us should go out of the house. He will take care of everything. And if we have to go out of the house, he will escort us till we're far away where people don't know who we are. And that was the thing. After everybody left, my mother would look at the clock because of the 10 minutes. And my father told her it will not be 10 minutes. And we waited and waited until it was dark. And I remember my mother started crying because my brother wasn't back. And then my father started crying, and I started crying. We all started crying. It was a very difficult night, as you can imagine. And then when it came time to go to sleep, my parents said, I was already 12 years old. I had my own bed. I shared a room with my brother. It was a small 3-room apartment. And they said, no, you're going to sleep with us in bed. I guess they were feeling nervous. I'm not sure. But I was 12 years old and in bed with them. And that was the first night. And that night is still something I think of and I dream of sometimes. So that's what happened. And then the next day was June 6th, and the media was claiming victory, and we are at the doors of Tel Aviv and so on. And by the time we got into the ceasefire, my brother still hasn't come back home, and we were disturbed. We quickly learned that what happened to my brother happened to all Egyptian Jewish men between the age of 17 and to the age of about 60, 65. And there was even a person who was 80 years old, a man who was 80 years old, who was in prison, who was arrested from Alexandria. And we did not know where they were for about a month or 6 weeks, but we ended up learning that they are in the detention camp of Abu Zabal, which is not far from Cairo, but it's a prison with a very bad reputation. A week later, a Christian friend of ours came and visited, and she was asked, as soon as she came in, she asked where my brother is, and we told her. Now later, this person said she was in she lived near the Cairo train station, and she told me that she saw trucks with people on top of them, and people screaming Yahud, Yahud, Jews, and abusing them, throwing stones at them. And that is because Egypt did not, on the Wednesday of the war, Egypt had promised parading Israeli POWs, and apparently there was no Israeli POWs, so they took the Jews that were arrested and they put them on trucks and they paraded them. And that's what happened before they sent them to prison. And that happens in the train station in Alexandria, and along the route from Alexandria to Cairo, they were handcuffed, and the wagon did not have windows, and they were throwing stones. Even the guards who were guarding them in the train thought they were Israelis. And then when they heard them speaking Egyptian Arabic, he asked, how come you know Arabic so well? So they were paraded instead of Israeli POWs. And so much for the distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. That I've never seen happen, okay? So in prison, it was very bad. They were tortured. My uncle was arrested. And I know that when I saw him, he had this kind of gesture all his life since then. And I believe it's because somebody did something, there was a nerve and hit him and hit his nerve. So there was torture, and that was life in prison. For that entire summer, my mother would go to the bedroom every day and cry for 10 minutes. And so this is the prison. Now the families were without men, essentially. All the men were arrested, almost all. So my father was not arrested. But a month later, we heard the custodian yelling at people saying, "Go away, sons of dogs. Whoever was here, you took." We understood that he was mad at the people coming back to pick us up. We didn't know. And then a few minutes later, he knocked at the door to tell us that they came to ask for my father, but he pretended they were asking for my brother, and he sent them away. So we were fortunate with our neighbors and the custodian and all that. Not everybody was so fortunate. About a month later, we had another knock at the door, and we opened the door, and we see my cousins and my aunt with bags. The minute I saw the bags, I understood that their neighbors were not nice like us, and they said their neighbors made their life hell, and they came and stayed with us. So it was, we were fortunate, but others were not. At the same time, the women had to take over the husband's business, and they were blackmailed. People would buy but never pay. People would borrow money but never give any, never return. And if a woman says something, they would threaten by saying that they will tell the authority that she has relatives in Israel. And some women were abused, but they prefer not to talk about it. And I will not go into the details of what they went through. So that was the story. We saw my brother for the first time when they allowed visits after pressure from outside organization, and he had lost weight. He was very emotional. And the story continued they were transferred from one prison to the other, the Torah prison. And we used to see him once a month, and then they allowed once a week, but behind bars. And that was the story. At school, I was growing up, becoming 13, 14, 15. The cutoff age was 17. And you can imagine the anxiety I felt as I was growing up. My brother in prison, I was expecting to be picked up sometime as I grow older. In any case, the way this whole ordeal ended was my brother, some stayed less than 3 years, other more than 3 years. My brother stayed 3 years and 10 days. The exact way they were free is not clear to me until now, but my understanding, people had all sort of explanation that American Jewish organization paid money in Nasser's account. Nasser is the dictator at the time. For each head they paid, I don't know how much. And that is how the Jews were freed. However, that is not confirmed. So that's on June 15, 1970, when I was almost 15 years old. My brother had to go straight from prison to the airport, had to sign that he will never set foot in Egypt again, has documents, and that he's no citizenship, nothing. He was stateless, and he was thrown on a plane and disgorged in France. So that was what happened to my brother. After that, we wanted to leave the country, even though my father had a pension from the government. He did not want what happened to him, to my brother, to happen to me, and we were preparing to leave. And the authorities were eager to see us leave. So every month, my father would go and pick up his pension and get paid. Come June 1970 or July 1970, he goes to the bank, and the way you do it is you sign your a piece of paper, and they give you a receipt, and then you go to the cashier, you pick up your money. He did that. When he got to the cashier, they told him the cashier is not here, come tomorrow. He comes tomorrow, he's not here, he's sick, come tomorrow. He understood that they don't want to give him his pension. He contacted people from his law school, his professors at his law school, to see if they can help. And after 2 months, they made phone calls and they came with him to the bank, and that for 2 months. During these 2 months, he was very easy to provoke, and it was very, very tense at home because he felt very offended at it, but he never told us what happened. He only told that story after we left. In any case, then in the summer of 1970, usually Jews, when they left the country, they sold their furniture dirt cheap, or they didn't sell, they just left. In our case, we were more fortunate. Our friends told us, you do not sell the furniture, you do not seek. We are going to look for, for buyers for you from our family. And that worked very well. Most of the furniture was sold, and we were happy to sell it at a good price. It was certainly not dirt cheap, it was fair. It was at a discount because they are friends. And a few things they couldn't sell, we told them not to worry. And then we just, that's how it ended. My brother, in the meantime, when we arrived in Paris, he was already in Israel on July 30. We arrived in October 12, 1970. He went to Israel July 30, and he started his studies at the Technion. He had a scholarship, but I should say one more thing, and I know my time is limited, is that before we left, my father went around to Cairo University Engineering School, where my brother had finished all his studies except one project. And he asked for them to hand him the degree, and they wouldn't do that. And he was very, he was begging them, and they just shrugged him off. Anyway, we left in October 1970. And my brother did his bachelor's, his master's, and his PhD at the Technion. He then went to work for the Ministry of Defense in Israel. He did very well. He started a family, and he has now three children and 10 grandchildren. And he won the Israel Prize in 1994. That's the highest honor in the country. He is a very brilliant engineer. And he also won Lifetime Achievement Award from the Ministry of Defense. So that is, I would like to leave it with a positive thing. If it's okay, if I still have time, I'd like to share a few pictures.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Just 1 second.
Share screen's ready.
Yep.
Whatever you like.
Can I do that now?
Yes.
Okay, so can you see, I'm not sure what you're seeing, but I will, here is my brother with his, with this in 19, so the girl, this is my brother, the girl.
We can just see 6 thumbnails at present. We can't see the whole pictures.
Yeah, just double click on the picture.
On the picture you want to show us.
Okay.
We've only got the thumbnails.
Can you see it?
Only very small. It's like a postage stamp.
Is that better?
No, what we can see is like your Explorer or whatever the screen
your desktop.
is. The desktop. We can see that.
I am clicking on the pictures. So
it's not going into the picture.
Okay, so let me try this. Okay, I don't know what to do about that. So
it's whatever you need to do at your end to see them.
So how can I unshare and then share again.
What I'll do is okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I am going to share again, and let's see if that works. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, we can see.
Oops. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's
Okay,
good.
you can see that now?
Yes, yes. Is that your
Okay, so
brother?
that the little boy here is my brother before 1957, and behind him is a girl he knew when he was that age. That girl was thrown out of Egypt in 1956. They came to her parents and they told them, "You're to leave." And the grandmother was, remember that she was pushed against the wall by the security men, and they left. And then when he went to Paris, he reconnected with her, and that's a sweetheart. He married, and with her he has 3 children and 10 grandchildren. I would like to try to show other pictures. This is my mother. So my mother was the principal of the Jewish schools, of 2 Jewish schools. The last one closed in 1965, and she's here with one of her students. You see that, right?
No, we're still seeing Sami and Nelly.
Okay, so we have to unshare and share again.
Yep.
Okay, so let me share again. Okay. So let me go and share again. Just a second. I'm looking for it. This is more complicated than I thought. Okay, so these pictures, that's, I think you see 2 pictures, right? A woman with a student.
No,
Nothing.
nothing's come up.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I will describe the picture. That's my mother, who is the principal of the Jewish school, with her student, who is one of the students. The other picture is with 2 teachers. And unfortunately, the teacher that I was hoping to show you is a woman who, in 1948, there was a massacre, a few massacres in the 1940, where more than 40 Jews were killed. And this teacher, and I'm unable to show the picture, she lost 2 brothers, I think, and an aunt in the massacres of 1948, and her brothers were incarcerated with my brother in 1967.
Oh,
so it's unfortunate that I can't show you the pictures. I can try to again.
No, we better. I think what we'll do is wrap up there, Rami.
Okay, can you see it?
No,
Well,
we can't.
Okay, so
share the screen. What
Sorry.
I'll do,
this woman who was my teacher with a colleague.
Try now, Rami, and only Rami, try and share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I will try to share screen, and here it is.
Right, it's working.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Okay, so this is my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And with one of the students in the Jewish school, and the Jewish school had Muslim students also. And then this woman on my left, so she should be on your left also.
Yeah.
My mother is in the middle. On her right is this teacher who lost immediate members of her family in 1948, a brother or 2 and an aunt. And she was my teacher in the school. And then 2 of her brothers in 1967 were incarcerated for more than 3 years with my brother. Wow. And they went to Israel. Yeah. So this is the picture. One more picture which comes from the prison, what they experienced in prison. So let's unshare and try share again.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share again. And that is, what do you see now?
Just you, Rami.
Okay, so what I'm trying to show is an instrument that the Jews in these camps used. It's called the tau. It was not, they were not allowed to cook. Gasoline was not allowed. But for some reason, cologne, cologne, not perfume, but cologne, rubbing alcohol, I guess, I'm not sure what it is, was allowed. So they used it for cooking. And the instrument I'm trying to show is what they used to hide under the ground. So they would dig a hole in the dust. They would put that instrument, and they would, the flames would not be visible. They would put the dish on top of it, and that's how they would cook. Let's give it one more try.
Let's give it one try. Yeah.
Because that comes from the prison. Okay.
What ingenuity.
It's the tau. They called it, I don't know why they call it, but they call it the tau. Do you see it now?
No, we don't.
Okay, so let's unshare, and then I know what the trick is now. If you unshare and share again, I will be able to show you the tau. So, and this is our, I don't know, what do you see now? Do you see synagogue?
Nothing yet.
Just see you.
Okay, so let me, I will try sharing again. Make sure I see the green. Where is that green share thing?
Right, it's on the toolbar on your dashboard.
Yeah, it doesn't show. It disappeared.
Participants can share screens, so it shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
I don't. Anyway.
Can we leave it for now and perhaps come back?
Okay, sure.
Rami, and we can have another go.
No problem. But the tau is something that's unique to this experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Rami, thank you very much. And I particularly appreciate the fact that, it was painful for you to tell that story, but you did tell it very well. And thank you for allowing me to republish it in my book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rami. Lovely
Please
story.
stay with us.
Sure, I will.
Okay, so we now move on to Iraq, where there were about 150,000 Jews, but 95, this is it, we've got it, the tau. Thank you, we finally got it. Thank you. So I think we come back to Iraq, where 150,000 Jews in 1948, 95% of them were airlifted to Israel in 1950-51. But Lisette's parents, however, did not leave Iraq. The community numbered about 3,000 in the late 1960s. So I'd like to hand over to Lisette so she can tell her story of what happened after 1967. Thank you very much, Lisette.
Just to mention, my sisters left in the late 50s and beginning 60s with a passport, because at that time there was a semi-normalization in Iraq. I, being the youngest, stayed behind with my parents because they were hoping one day to be able to salvage their property. So now I want to say that the people staying behind in Iraq who chose not to leave, we were too scared to even mention the word Israel, because it was illegal to neither go to Israel nor even contact anybody who lives in Israel, even though it's your immediate family member who left in 51. We did not know what Israel looked like. We did not dare draw the Star of David or so much as identify with it. The regime in Iraq underwent many bloody revolutions, the first one being in 1958 when the king was killed, and many others followed. The last one was in 1963 when the Ba'ath Party came, and Saddam was very much a player in it, but a little bit more in the background. Now, right after 1963 revolution, coup d'etat by the Ba'ath Party, the Jews were already restricted from travel. They already stopped giving us passports. And now, even though we were still living in Iraq and being Iraqi nationals, we were no longer allowed to sell our own property. However, when the 6-Day War broke out. And once Israel won, it happened the same as everywhere else, where initially the first 5 days they were blaring on the radio that they'll be putting up the Arab flag on Tel Aviv in half an hour, that they killed, I don't know how many people, 7 planes. Anyway, they were euphoric about their victory. And on TV, they had people yelling and chanting, kill, kill, kill. Kill them with the knives, shred them with your teeth. These are 7-year-old, 8-year-old girls who were singing those songs on TV. It was pretty scary. Now they tightened the screws even more on the Jews who were still living there. As Lynn said, about 3,000 of us were left after the mass immigration. So they cut off all our telephones immediately after they realized that they lost the war. The students who graduated from high school were no longer admitted to university. I myself was already at university, so I was continuing, but under constant threat that we will be kicked out any day. They revoked all the commercial licenses that Jews had. They kicked out every Jew from every employment office and instructed all private businesses to fire their Jewish employees. So in Iraq, there was no unemployment insurance, of course, and many children at school, many Jewish children started to faint from hunger. And when the school administration found that out, they gave them food baskets, but they would only eat part of it because they wanted to take the rest to their parents who hadn't eaten either. It was a very sad situation. Once they cut off our phones, they also were watching our homes in armchairs. They had people from the Aman in Arabic means security, but it really what it really meant was, like you said before, the investigation, the FBI, which was very much against the Jews. They were watching our every going and coming, writing everything down. I was still going to school. Every time I left the house, they would write something. Anytime anybody rang the bell, they would come running after them, bombarding them with questions in order to intimidate them never to come back. And eventually, they, same as with Rami, they started to come at night, late at night, never during the day, always at night, to terrify people, to start searching the house, to take anything as evidence of spying. Even the Time and Newsweek magazine that we bought at the local newspaper stand in Iraq could be considered spying matter, even though when these magazines came, if there was ever an article about Israel, it was always torn out of the whole magazine. Now, if on the cover of that magazine there was something about Israel mentioned, the whole magazine wouldn't come that week. They also, as I said, came at night. They would arrest the man or the woman in the house, or the son, daughter. It could be anyone. It got to a point where every time a car passed by our house, I would wake up literally from my sleep and kneel on the floor and pray that they do not ring the doorbell, whether it's midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. I could never sleep every time I heard a car pass by the house. Eventually, I persuaded my mom to buy sleeping pills so I commit suicide if they come to get me. My mom went and bought sleeping pills for herself and for me in case this would happen. And it happened the same. We were hearing that the Jews in Syria, the Jews in Egypt were more or less as bad as us. We couldn't tell which was worse, but we could, and eventually they intensified the arrests, same as with Rami, saying we'll bring him back in 2 hours. In Basra, they went to pick up somebody. And when the mother told them that, oh, well, he's in England, he's studying, and his younger brother was peeking out to see who rang the bell, they told her, oh, you have another son. Well, we'll take him. She said, he is sick. He has fever. And he told her, we'll bring him back in half an hour. Don't worry. They took him. She never was able to see him again. These people they took from Basra and from Iraq were being tortured. As I said, the torture was so intense and so gruesome that I'm not going to go into it. Just suffice to say that they had East German doctors to come and examine these prisoners to see how much torture they can bear before dying. Well, a few of them did die from torture. And what did the government do? They put their name in the paper saying so-and-so escaped and under penalty of death if we find them, but they already died under their torture. They wouldn't even give their bodies back to the families. They were that distorted. However, the people who survived, the very few people who survived that were able to say what happened. And of course, in order to avoid dying by torture, some of them were persuaded to admit that they were spies on the promise that they will have a lighter sentence. Some of the prisoners had their wives, their sisters raped in front of them. One gentleman, Gabai, his daughter wrote a book, Anonymous Terrorist Hunter, it was called, Rita Katz. And she mentioned how her mother, who was pregnant, was being taken every day from the there were 5 children. They'd take her every day and torture her and rape her in front of her husband. And they told him, if you do not admit that you're a spy, we're going to cut up her stomach and give you your baby on a silver platter. So the poor guy, of course, gave in and said that he did spy. And you have to dream up something you did. In fact, what they did was he had new air conditioning in his house, and the air conditioning ducts, they called these spying material, that they were spying with radars with Israel. And it was just an air conditioning duct. So the ones who categorically refused to sign got the same fate, unfortunately, as the ones who did sign. Because one day in late December, early January, they started to have mock trials, a Mickey Mouse trial, that even a child who can use their mind can tell that things are not tallying, and you can tell the story is not working. But they still conducted this Minnie Mouse trial, and every now and then they'd stop the live, seeing it live on TV, and they start showing songs, and the poor guys come back with a tooth missing, with a hand bleeding, with all disheveled. So they torture them and bring them back, and they torture them and bringing them back. Most of them were Jews. The state appointed a lawyer for them in that court, and the lawyer further incriminated them, saying, well, they are admitting that they were spies, so you can do whatever you want with them. That's their lawyer. Look at what Amber Heard's lawyer are doing now. Anyway, the verdict was to hang most of them. And they hanged them the very same night that the verdict came out. The verdict came out at 7, they hanged them before midnight that night. And eventually in the morning when we woke up on that fateful day of January the 27th, 1969, we were supposed to go to university. We had our midterm exams, so we had to go to university. We had a cleaning lady who came to us from her house, and she knocked on my door at 7 in the morning and said, "Don't go to university today. They're all hanging in the square." They hanged the Jews. 10 Jews were hanged and 3 others, non-Jews, who were enemies of Saddam. And of course, I had to go to university because of my exams. And some of these kids who were hanged, they blamed them for having blown up a bridge in 1962. Their ages were 16 and 17, and at court they said that they were 18 in order to make it legal to hang them. Now in 1962, when they were supposed to have blown up that bridge, they were 10 years old. And that bridge was still there. It was unscathed, it wasn't touched, it was never blown up. So they didn't even bother covering their lies. Yet the Iraqi people who love bloodshed, I mean, they cut up their own prime minister when they killed him in 58. So what's a few Jews hanging in a square? That's wonderful, that's to celebrate. They were so hungry for blood. They decided to believe those blatant lies. The country went into a real frenzy of jubilation, singing and praising the FBI and praising the country and thanking the good Lord for having saved them from those horrible spies. Thousands of Iraqis went chanting in the street around the bodies of those people. Women, kids picnicking around them, women breastfeeding their children, 11, 10-year-old girls wearing their gold clothes, running to the square right in front of our house. We were a 10-minute walk away from that square. And you could see those kids euphoric, running to see people hanged. And again, the radio was blaring that they got rid of their spies, and they are encouraging everyone to denounce anybody from the 5th column. So we were all exposed to being denounced. And when we went to the university that day, feeling we had our exams, I was thinking at university, they are educated, they were our friends. We help them with exams, we help them study for the exams, we help translating what they don't understand in English to them. They are our friends, they are our, it was not a big university, so everybody knew everybody. And I figured, I'm sure they'll realize and I'm sure they'll sympathize with us. But no, we go to university and we are received with those banners. We welcome what the government did, and we ask the government to do more. And they're looking at us and laughing. And we are too scared to show that we are grieving, because if we do, it means we are spies too. And the government declared that a national holiday, so we didn't have to sit for exams, even though we went to university. So what did the students do? They arranged buses to take the 50-minute ride all the way back downtown to go and jump and over the bodies of those poor people. They're touching them, they are spitting on them, whatever you want, they did. They are really savages. They were savages then, and I'm not sure how much better they've become now. I think they are even worse. So I feel, as a Jew, who was living in Iraq that day, I feel that that day is emblazoned in the very DNA, in our very DNA of every Jew who lived in Iraq that day. And I will never forgive them, nor would I ever forget those classmates, those students who were our schoolmates who turned against us. And now some of them try to be in contact with us. Well, I really don't enjoy even connecting with them, and I don't want to, and I've been keeping a low profile, hopefully. Well, Saddam Hussein was doing that in order to more or less strengthen his reign, in order to get rid of his real enemies. And every time he did that, he would kill a few Jews with his enemies in order to justify it to his people. And people believed everything. They wanted to believe everything. And eventually, a year and a half later, his reign became a little stronger after all those executions. Oh, there was a big world outcry, by the way, and Israel made sure they tell the whole world that these were not their spies. And what did Iraq answer? We have enough trees and enough Jews to hang all of them on our trees. That was the answer Iraq gave. So eventually, they did more executions with more Jews being executed, but a little less fanfare. They didn't have the people jumping all over them with glee. Eventually, a small window of opportunity opened for us to escape from Iraq, because Kurdistan in the north of Iraq, who was always fighting with Iraq, had a semi-truce with the Iraq, with Saddam at the time. And after, when Saddam felt stronger in his reign, he was paid, like the Iraqi government was paid by the Jews outside Iraq to allow us to leave. So they decided to just give a blind eye to us trying to escape, since they were being paid for every one of us leaving. Plus, once we leave, Iraqi Jews had a lot of property. We were well treated, more or less, especially when the king was there or before. And unfortunately for me, both my grandparents had a lot of property, to the point where my grandfather, my father's father, had one of the biggest homes in 1920 when they appointed a king in Iraq, and they asked him to rent his house out to the king because there was no palace good for a king. Yet my dad, who was one out of 8 siblings, left Iraq in 1990 with nothing. The son of and he was the last of the siblings to stay in Iraq. So it was a very tenuous situation. So when I saw no future for me in Iraq, oh yeah, and a lot of people started to try to escape that summer, 1970, to the point where in September, the Iraqi government was not going to make it very easy for us to escape. They were rounding up people once in a while anyway, putting them in prison. Some were never heard of again. Some disappeared. But in one day, they rounded 150 Jews from northern Iraq in Kurdistan who were trying to escape, the youngest being 6 months, the oldest being over 80. And they took all of them, put them in one Baha'i temple, because they confiscated the temple from the Baha'is too. They were persona non grata as well. They put them all in the Baha'i temple. Some were tortured, some were questioned, others were threatened. Luckily, they did not kill any of them in this group. And once Nasser died suddenly in 1970, around September, the Iraqis now wanted to bring in the Egyptian enemies that they had. So they had to empty part of the prison. So they decided to let the Jews go, the ones that they had imprisoned, the 150. So they were released the eve of Rosh Hashanah, just the day before the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the day of the eve of Rosh Hashanah, which was a wonderful omen for all of us. On Rosh Hashanah, we all went to the synagogue to thank God for their safety. I went to each and everybody's home. They were all most my classmates, some cousins of mine, just to congratulate them and see that they're alive and they're well. And eventually, the way was closed, of course, after this mass roundup. And eventually it opened slowly again, being given more money to the government. And my father, who knew he wasn't going to leave because of everything he owned, and my grandmother was alive then, which is Lynn's grandmother too. She also stayed behind. And so my dad realized he has to let me go, and he gave his blessing for me to escape. And that was November 7th. I escaped with an aunt of mine, Lynn's aunt, who vouched that she would take care of me. And my dad realized that if I am to leave, she would be the best person I could escape with, along with another family who was also Amal and Haim Rijwan, who were related to us as well. So the women had to wear, we went to the market and we bought the black abba to look like the normal peasants of Iraq. Actually, the Iraqis were not wearing these abbas then. Saddam Hussein was against it, and it was mainly the peasants or people living in villages who wore them. So we wore that and pretended we went to take, the smuggler arranged for a taxi driver that was going to Arbil, which is midway to north of Iraq, to take us. And we were supposed to fill in the slot and take that particular taxi. At the time it was leaving at noon from the big taxi station in Iraq. I went with we had a driver who was with us since I was 8. He was Armenian, and he was the most loyal person we had. And he took me to that station without my parents saying goodbye, without me saying goodbye to him. He knew exactly what was happening, but I didn't even tell him bye. He dropped me off with one small piece of luggage, because they told us not to bring too much, because we might have to walk across the border. We might have to ride a mule. We don't know how many days it would take, but just to carry something that we could carry ourselves. And there were no wheels then for those suitcases. So once he dropped me off at the station, I didn't know where to go. And up to now, I remember hearing somebody behind me saying, go to the black car on the right. I honestly felt like I was in one of those James Bond movies. Like, you know, I still don't know who it was who told me that. And I went to the car. I saw Emily there. And of course, my Aunt Marcel went separately. We didn't go together. We went separately, so it doesn't show. My suitcase was put in the car a day before, so it doesn't show when, you know, everybody was asleep. And so when I saw Amal there and I saw the family, I just went to the car and we pretended we didn't know each other, because we are picking up that taxi as though we are going, it's like taking a bus, but it's a taxi, a big taxi that fills up and then leaves. So we pretended we didn't know each other. We just went in the car, sat there. There was some army general trying to take that car. Eventually the baby was screaming, and the general just left and went to the other car, a little miracle, the baby with us. And eventually we knew we had 8 checkpoints to pass. The first one, the baby was screaming. They saw the baby, they saw us, and the taxi driver managed to get an older Kurdish man who lives up north, was going back home, to sit up front. And it looked like as though we were his family. And so when we went the first time, as I said, the baby was screaming, they let us go. The second time he was sleeping, they let us go. The third time we became more or less transparent. They were asking for IDs from the driver and the Kurdish man. We didn't count. Actually, the only ID I carried was my driver's license because it didn't show I'm Jewish, and my university ID, which did not show I was Jewish. Otherwise, every other ID you own says you are Jewish.
Can I just stop you there, Lisette, because we've been overrunning a little bit, but you finally made it across the border into Iran.
Yes. We made it into Iran, where I had an uncle and his wife who received us, and it was heaven in Iran.
And
So,
we have a few pictures to show.
Yeah, a lot of us did escape that way, and many of us met in Iran once we escaped. And we were so euphoric. Show the pictures.
Sorry,
So,
it goes on from
sorry.
Eveline's one, yeah.
That's
Okay,
the
so
hanging. That's the hanging in Iraq. These are the people. And look at all the people around them jubilating.
And they say 500,000 Iraqis turned up that day.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a national holiday. Actually, everybody who boarded the bus was taken straight to that, to the square, including my university graduates. Here we are, all of us. This is one person who lives in Canada. That's me. She, I think, is Mona Yahya. I think she's online watching.
Yes, she's online. You're on the extreme right of the picture.
I'm on the extreme right. She lives in Montreal.
Yeah.
She lives in LA, Israel.
You're scattered all over the world.
Yes, is London.
Okay.
Yeah, that's us. Yes, that's an engagement party we went to
in Iran.
Yeah. In Iran.
Yeah.
One of the two of the escapees got engaged, and that's me here. And that's the lady I escaped with, Amal, and her children who live in London now. And these were also other escapees. From all of these, the only one I don't know anymore anything about is him. And the other two, I must mention, the ones on the right are the Atrakchi boys. One of their uncle was one of the people hanged in Iraq from Basra, unfortunately. And eventually, I think either this gentleman in the picture or his older brother or older cousin became an ambassador, an Israeli ambassador to Egypt when they opened relations. And unfortunately, when there was a bomb at the embassy, the Israeli embassy in Egypt, he got killed. So not only did he lose his father, who was hanged in Iraq, he then got killed as an Israeli ambassador in Egypt, in the embassy in Egypt.
Yeah, that never rains, but it pours. Reminds us of Rami's story about the woman who lost her close relatives in Egypt.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much, Lisette. That was incredible. And I know it's very painful to relive these stories, but I think we have to do it in the, for the sake of history, for the sake of the truth. And so, what you're doing is very important. I think what all of you are doing is very important. So if there are any questions or comments, please do write them in the chat.
I think Rami wants to go first. Rami is next.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to say
let Rami have time.
The public hanging that you saw in Iraq happened in January of 1969, I think.
Yes.
And at that time, my brother and all the Egyptian Jews were incarcerated, and we were very nervous that this would happen in Egypt. And not only that, but I do recall a cartoon by Egypt's main, #1 cartoonist in Al-Ahram, the main Egyptian newspaper, praising the hanging. And my father was very upset about it. I do have the cartoon on my computer, but it would take a while to do it. And it was sticking a tongue essentially at the world who is shocked shocked by the hanging, and you get a person representing the Arab world saying, "And we have more and more," and we were very nervous when this happened. So it was within a few months after the Abdulrahman Arif, the president of Iraq, was overthrown by Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr and Saddam Hussein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lisette, do you want to come in?
I wanted to add one thing. I mean, I did escape, but my parents stayed behind, and so did my grandmother for 20 years after my escape. So my parents missed out on every of their children's weddings, their grandchildren's birth, their bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. They didn't see any of that. I escaped in 70. My parents finally came out in 90 with a passport when there were only 70 Jews left. And my father was 80 years old, and they left with nothing. So they waited 20 years. They survived 20 years of mere survival and came out with nothing anyway. And in the meantime, every time I would get a letter from them, it took 3 weeks. I didn't know if they were still alive from the day they wrote the letter till the day I received it. So it was a real scary, all those 20 years were scary for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's very easy to minimize the kind of trauma, the long-lasting trauma that people still suffer from after these experiences. It's easy to say, oh, well, they got out and they rebuilt their lives and that sort of thing. But in fact, the mental scars remain, don't they?
Well, we did get embraced by the State of Israel and by Jewish organization and the U.S., Canada, and they took us, and we weren't seeking to become terrorists. And once you're a refugee, you resettle, and we did not commit acts of terror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which unfortunately, what happened with Arab refugees from Israel, they were incarcerated to perpetuate the problem, and they were, terrorist camps were right next to the refugee camps.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the difference, and people don't realize that difference.
No, unfortunately. Were you given refugee status, Lisette, when you left?
Yes.
Yeah,
we were stateless, and we got refugee status.
Yeah, you got refugee status. And you, Lisette? No, you can't hear her.
I thought she keeps on muting herself, though.
Sorry, can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
I was muted. No, we were not given refugee status. Any of the Iraqis who did leave Iraq, who escaped from Iraq, whether they went to England, whether they went to the States or Canada, we were not acknowledged by neither the Sukhnut nor the JIS. We all came as immigrants. I came alone, and with my points, like speaking English and French and all that, and being young and being healthy, I got enough points to get to immigrate to Canada, but not as a refugee. I was not given 1 cent by anybody. I had to start working 2 days after I arrived to Canada. So
yeah, we also had to start. We also had to start working, but we were given. I don't know, but we were given pieces of paper that said we were stateless refugees, and we had no citizenship, and the refugee organization took care of us.
I was stateless, but nobody gave me any. Nobody gave me any status.
Well, what about the Libyan Jews? Eveleen, do you know? Do you know if they were?
Because Aldo was so, I can't really speak for lots of other people because I honestly don't know, but I know in my husband's case, he also, although, because when he wasn't left Libya, he was also given a stateless paper, but within a short period of time, he took up British citizenship. And our story is slightly different. I mean, when I listened to the two other speakers, I hope I haven't glossed over, but Lynn asked me to talk about my experience and I couldn't sort of talk about other people's. I don't get the feeling, and Lynn will know better because she's written such a lot. I know it was awful. I'm not trying to say, and I know people were killed and I know people had to leave with nothing, but I think the stories I've heard from the two other people are really quite unbelievably disturbing. I don't think I'm glossing over, but I was just talking on my personal level of my experiences.
I don't think you should minimize your experience at all, because I think that was also extremely dramatic and worrying, and it was an uprooting,
Yes.
to use the phrase. and people should realize that, you know, it happened to thousands of people, just like you described, you know, and all this should be on the historical record. So
Thank you.
yes, there's a correction in the chat. The Atrakchi was actually an attaché who worked at the Israeli embassy, and Edward Cohen says he was a relative of his, and this man was killed in a taxi or car. And Ala Fahi says, in America, Egyptian Jews were admitted as refugees and given a green card. Retroactively, 2 years later, when the paperwork was processed, and refugee did not mean they were granted anything, and his refugee status was stamped on his Egyptian passport. Yeah, and Emil Cohen says his parents and sister who fled Iraq, like Lisette, were given a permit to stay as soon as they came to London. So that's good. Ida Zloof came from Iraq with a passport to England. So that was, some of the Iraqi Jews did not escape illegally. They actually came with a passport. I think things did get a little bit easier in the early 70s. But they were not allowed to work, paid or unpaid, and until an employer got a work permit for them. So that's interesting. So, and Rita has something to add about the night of the 6th of June. Shall we unmute Rita? See if we can find Rita on the list so that you can.
Okay, Rita, do you want to start your video as well, please?
Sorry, I am.
Yeah. Hi, Rita.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Hello. I'm not, I just wanted to add one thing. On that night, on that day, the streets where everybody was calling about, oh, we're going to go kill the Jews. We are going to bring so many girls from there. Okay. And when we went home, we were telling I am saying to my mom, look what they're saying to us. Absolutely no respect or anything. And so my mom says, in Arabic, she said, "Motam qabl," that means their death is before that happened.
They'll die first. They'll die
first.
Yeah.
So actually that night, the government sent people to the houses to check if we have blackened all the windows because they were expecting airplanes to come raid Iraq. Actually, there was an airplane and someone, one airplane went down and one Jewish guy was in the prison on that particular night. But the story is they came into the houses to check. My mom, I lost my dad in the year before, and my mom was scared because I was the oldest and I was a minor, and my brother was younger than me and he was a minor too. So what happened is my mom said, let's go to next door neighbor, and they were Muslim. And so we went next door neighbor, and she told him, the guys are coming in to check the house. Can you please go there while we stay at your house? And he said, yes. So we sat there. They came, they checked the house, everything was fine. He came back. And while we were sitting and we were, you know, they were talking and everything, at about, I want to say 9 o'clock at night, his eldest son walked in the house, and he says, open the radio, and he says, they say, why, what happened? He says, all the airplanes are down, and they said, no, we have victory everywhere. And he says, no, that's not true. Israel has bombed all the airplanes and opened it on Israel. So you have no idea. We were put in such a situation. Our heart was full of joy, because we were thinking, hey, everyone and his family in Israel is affected by this situation. And we said, oh my God, you cannot show on your skin, on your face, how happy we were, but we were like frozen in time at that minute. So the minute that he stopped talking, we excused ourselves and we went home. Mm-hmm. The minute we got inside the house, and it was black, absolutely black, because there was no light. We were not supposed to turn on the light. We held each other's hand, me, my brother, and my mom, and we were dancing, literally jumping up and down without no rhythm or music. That's worth every single thing. We were happy.
Yeah.
Long live Israel.
Oh, well, that's amazing. Yeah, but obviously if you'd been found out, you would have immediately been accused of spying, and that would have been it.
Yeah, well, for sure. We have, I mean, I do have long history with the Iraqi people, because we lived in the other side of the river, and next door to us was the Shashoua family, and the Shashoua family had bought a castle next door to us, and he wanted to get us out of there. We have a long history with the government, so I tried to get some pictures, but from investigating the matter, it seems that they have taken all these properties, and now it became a bridge.
Right. Well, I think, you know, we've been at it for quite a long time now, and it's probably time to wrap up. But I just wanted to ask all of you one question, and that is, how do you see the future with the people you used to live with? Do you have hope that, you know, that there could be peace and reconciliation after everything you've been through, after everything you've seen? I mean, I'll start with you, Eveleen.
Look at me. If you're looking at the pictures, look at Lisette and look at me. We were both shaking our head. Absolutely no.
Okay, right. Well, I'll come to Lisette in a second, but Eveleen.
I truly do not think there is any future with any new relationship with Libya. I know people, I've read articles in the paper about a gentleman from Rome who's gone back and wants to open up the synagogue and build bridges. I think it's a couple of years ago. I think he's in, if I can be respectful, cloud cuckoo land. I truly do not think. I think it's very nice that there are still some tenuous relationships between people that knew each other there. I mean, as I say, when my husband was alive, over the years after he left, he did maintain relationships with Arab Muslims in London that were from Libya. There were certain friendships, but everything has changed. Personally, I don't think there's any future of any sort of reconciliation there. Sorry to be negative, but I'm being honest, but others might not agree.
Rami, what do you think? Oh, you're muted. Hang on.
I haven't muted him, darling.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I do think that as far as our friends, we're still in touch with them, with Egypt. Of course, there were many people, and I do remember them, and I would avoid them. But we have both Muslims and Christian friends who helped us, and we were in touch, and we kept in touch, and we're still in touch. And my nephew visited them. Some of them are in Toronto, a Muslim family, and my nephew, my brother's son, visited them. So yeah, so that is the people at the friends level, the friendship is ongoing. Now you ask me if reconciliation, it is conditional. To me, it is possible, conditioned on the recognition of the grievance of recognizing our grievances, recognizing the injustices that happened to us, and offering us a compensation, and at the same time recognizing that Jews have the right to the state of Israel, to the Jewish state. If these conditions are satisfied, yes. If not, then no. If you have the kind of peace that you now have with Morocco and the Emirates, the warm peace, yes. But formal, Egypt is warming up, but formal and peace with a grudge, then no, there is no. So it's conditional on a change in attitude and on recognition of the injustices. And if we are to offer compensation to Arab refugees from Israel, Jewish refugees from Arab countries should also get compensation.
Right. Okay, Lisette, you have the last word. Are you muted? Hope
If
not.
she's muted herself. I haven't muted anyone.
Dying, I think you're muted.
Now
Yes, now.
Okay.
Now.
As far as I'm concerned, I probably have one or two Muslim couples who I cherish their friendship, but I met them here. They were younger, they didn't know what was going on. However, the Iraqis who stayed in Iraq, who have been brainwashed all this time to hate Israel and hate the Jews, I think it's way too late. When we were there, and some of them knew us, they respected us. The few who did respect us, who did remain respecting us after we left, who are grateful for, say, the minister, Sassoon Heskel, the Jewish minister who in the 20s insisted that Iraq get paid in the equivalent of gold rather than the British pound, and was able to ride the Second World War with, when the British pound went down, the gold, Iraqi was still paid in gold for their oil. These people who remember that are starting to feel a little bit nostalgic for having Jews, but it's all talk. I don't believe in it. I think Iraq, unfortunately, has been virulently anti-Israel and anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish. And they are, after all the grandchildren of those who were from the Mufti of Jerusalem, who translated Mein Kampf to Arabic and instilled the Nazi hate for Jews. You see, in Germany, it was not allowed anymore, whereas in Iraq, nobody ever made it illegal.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think the new batch of Iraqis are, even though some of them may pay some lip talk to the Jews, because it's just a nostalgia, because we are like a myth by now. They don't really know us anymore.
So you're not particularly hopeful either, Lisette.
I am more than that. Just knowing our properties are now being being funneled to the Iranian militia and going to Iran.
Sure. things are very bad. Anyway, so I think we have to end it there. I just want to thank you all of you, Rami, Eveleen, and Lisette, for sharing your amazing stories. And thank you very much indeed for everybody who joined us tonight. Thank you for your comments. Just to say that we are winding down a little bit over the summer. We will be having one Harif lockdown lecture in July and one in August, and then we resume at full speed in September. But still, you know, check out our website, check out what we have on offer. And thank you once again for staying the course, for being with us for nearly 2 hours just now. I wish you a great summer and a healthy one. Stay away from Omicron or whatever the variants are. And thank you again. And as is our custom, I think we're now...
Can we do the marketing first?
Oh, okay, the marketing. Here comes the marketing.
Right, now, anyone who didn't give their name, I'm going to take you out of the meeting when we're going to do the next bit, I'm afraid. If you haven't given a name, the condition of going to talk to you, I have to let us.
Here is the advertising. This is the commercial break.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much for taking time off work, Rami.
Thank you. Are we done?
Well, if anyone wants to say anything, they can, because I think Lawrence is on mute. He's about to unmute.
There were a couple of people who didn't give their name, so I had to remove them before we make it over for everyone.
Thank yous in the chat.
Everyone,
thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Good night.
Everyone can now unmute themselves, and all the future events are being advertised.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Move forward quickly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, we've still got 20 people.
Oh yeah, that's tonight's talk. We don't need to publicize that one.
No, that's over with. But we hope to do a second part, as I mentioned, that would deal with Syria, Lebanon, Morocco, Tunisia, and Aden. So if anyone has any stories relating to those countries, please email me.
I will. Right. We'll leave, everyone should say their good nights or whatever in the background, but I'll leave the adverts on.
Thank you, everyone. Just one thing Sandra said, Sandra Kuku was mentioning how now Iraq just came up with a law criminalizing anybody who is in touch with any Israeli by execution or maybe prison as a lighter sentence. And so this is the answer to your question then.
Yeah.
There is not going to be peace with Iraq.
Right.
Okay.